Hi, I'm Austin Wintory, and lately on this channel I've been doing a lot of shop talk with friends and colleagues. And something that's probably very obviously shared in common amongst most of the people that I've been talking to on here is that they're all pretty successful. Their music is in huge productions, well-loved franchises, all of that kind of thing. And there's a lot that we can really learn from people that are really in a solid professional position. But it occurred to me that leaves the perspective of those just starting pretty underrepresented in terms of this world of YouTube videos and online content that is trying to shine a light on the inner workings of the life of a composer. I had this realization that our paths that we take are like tracing a line through a map where at this moment we turn left, at that moment we go north, at that moment we turn right, etc., etc., etc. And in the moment, especially when we're first starting out, all the choices that we might make almost overwhelm us, and we pick and hope for the best. And for those that are lucky enough to become successful, in looking back, all the things we might have done start to kind of mysteriously disappear, and we find ourselves just looking at the path as though that was always what we were going to do. And so I felt those for whom most of those left turns and right turns and go north or go south haven't been chosen yet would have a really interesting perspective on what does this industry look like. It's evolved a lot, and so any voice that's entering into it now versus when I started 15 years ago or when somebody started 30 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever, they're going to have a perspective that is unique to theirs. So, fortunately for me, I happen to know a handful of composers that I think are perfect candidates for this kind of conversation. I chose 4 in particular, people that are definitely in the early days of their career, but they have had enough successes to feel like their feet are planted on the ground and they're on their way. And they're all 4 very different from one another, and they're all 4 very different from me. And so it was exciting to get into conversation and just pick their brains. We had long conversations, so I have condensed this down a lot, but I'll probably later release the full chats just for those who are gluttonous and need even more of this kind of thing. So I just want to intro who those folks are, and then we'll get right into it. The 4 composers that I reached out to are the Canadian composer Rachel Hardy, the Turkish composer Esin, the American composer Raheem Frederick, and the Argentinian composer Ariel Esquivel. All 4 are composers whose paths I've crossed over the last handful of years or so, and who struck me as both talented and clearly having the kind of raw technical abilities needed, but also that magical factor that I don't really know how to describe, except it just leaves with the impression they're probably bound for great things. I've left links to their information below rather than just give lengthy intros to how we met and all that kind of thing to just get straight into the conversation. So check out their stuff below. To start, I want to just show some highlights of when the conversation turned to the question of what do they think has been instrumental in getting their own feet on the ground. I essentially asked them, how do you think your career has managed to successfully get rolling?
In Argentina, you don't have where to go and learn how to conduct an orchestra, how to record an orchestra. You don't have orchestras that record for visual media like often. It's like they put together some musicians for a project and that's it. I was wondering, how can I do that? I can't afford to going to Berkeley and have it like a homework that is recording in a studio with a large orchestra and conducting and having photo or whatever. I couldn't. I can't even now. So it's like, how can I get there, right? Okay, I will make my own orchestra. So I call a couple of friends, musicians, one by one, I talk to them, and one by one, I show it your video recording journey to every one of them. Because that's the video that inspired me and that I have there. It was like video game music, it's not film music. I didn't want to show film music because we were going to make video game music. So after a lot of meetings, I got 14 musicians, and we started what it was called the Ostrich Orchestra, and that was like a milestone for me. Not only that, but that decision made me learn all that I needed to solve what Far Cry 6 needed. Because I conducted 30 musicians in a studio that is huge here. It's not like you have 30 musicians in a studio all the time here. We are not London or LA or whatever. Having 30 musicians, and I was the contractor, I was the producer, I was the orchestrator, I was the composer, I was the conductor. I did everything. I hired the cameraman, I have the technicians, and I took 30 musicians from my city to the mountains to record in a studio, just in the mountain, no city, nor anything, just the mountain, the musicians, the studio, the nature, Far Cry 6 military marches. So that
really
was a
great,
huge decision.
It really made me smile when I was playing that game and the radio broadcasts would come in through the speakers and I could hear your marches, alongside Mr. Esposito's propaganda.
Yeah.
Really, I felt so proud of you. And it was so well done. It was so legit, man. I'm so happy that Eduardo and the folks at Ubisoft thought to do that, and I'm so glad that they found you for it. It was like the two sides of the equation, it made for a better game, and it made for such a great story too.
Through my time at SFCM, there was someone, John Mayer, who was coming in to do some of the mixing stuff with Sony stuff at the time, and we kind of just connected then. I did a little bit of editing work for him, mixing stuff for some of the projects there, and that was really about it. And that was like 2 or 3 years before I graduated. And then before he left, and then having graduated, I was working at my opera gig, just scheduling for the opera, and it was a random email on a Tuesday from him just being like, hey, let's talk. So we start talking. He lets me know that he's starting his startup, and he wants to bring me on to just kind of help out with some stuff and be like, the second person. And immediately it was just, culture shock of like, again, this is not something that I applied for. This wasn't one of the gigs that I was, feverishly up every night, sending mass applications to. This was primarily word of mouth from people who were happy with my work and happy with me and wanted to continue to work with me. So that was just a real shock of like, okay, yeah, I can be the perfect candidate and I can know everything and I can work hard, but ultimately it's kind of the connections and the impressions and the relationships you have, not for the sake of the work, but just genuine admiration and interest in the person. Again, we're people, not goals, not ways to success. We are humans who just want to interact with each other.
Well, I mean, it's funny. All of that is so utterly predictable, though, of you, I have to say, because in my time, I visited SFCM a bunch of times. You always stood out as somebody who was like hustling, you were always there for everything. You were always enthusiastic. You were always offering to help. Even when we were doing Journey Live at the school, and it wasn't really technically like part of the same umbrella of reasons why I was there, you just aggressively show up. And that is a constant thread. Like, that is a thing. The other folks that I've asked for this video, it's a high level takeaway that you can see in their paths as well. Like, some people, it's simultaneously broadcasting the kind of guy you are, which is somebody who's enthusiastic and like ready to take on stuff and ready to grow and learn and like doing it with a great attitude and all that stuff. But like, not just saying it, like you would show up. It wasn't like, it's so easy to go, yes, whatever, sending an email, whatever you need, I'm there for it. Like, talk is super cheap. You know how many emails show up like that? I get 1,000 unsolicited, like random, I don't know who they are, just people who just found me somehow or another online, and they send me an email saying, hey, do you think you need an assistant or whatever? And no matter no matter what resumes or whatever, or going to someone like you would always be an infinitely more predictable choice in those situations.
The school that I went to, I just went to my local university. So actually they didn't even have a program for the kind of music that I wanted to do. They just kind of had a general music degree. So that kind of added to the problem where I didn't even know where to start for media music in general. It was kind of like I got out of university and still had no clue, what this job would entail. So that kind of added to that, I guess.
I don't know. Arguably, I mean, we're all products of our path, and the fact that yours was maybe more generalized made you more receptive to Like if, like for example, when I was in school, the idea of investing in like an online presence would never have occurred to anybody. It wasn't a
Right.
thing then. You might not have started making YouTube videos and learning your craft through what that has done for you. Like just if nothing else, the production chops that has required you to develop, even if no one was watching your videos, just the skills that has honed in you as a side effect is a thing that you might not, if you had been actively discouraged or just been so overwhelmed with such more precise things that you were told you must learn, you might not have ever even opened that door. And it's hard, I imagine it's hard to imagine what life would look like right now if you didn't have that in your life. Like it's become such a big part of your life.
It's true. Yeah, I remember getting my first sample library for my YouTube channel, and I was like, I could use this for other things.
So I got my like biggest gig just because I'm obsessed with Disney. Like that's the reason why I wanted to do film scoring. But because at the age of 7, I decided that I wanted to work for them, but I didn't know what I could do. So when I realized that I could write music, I was like, okay, like this is what I want to do for Disney. So anyways, when I was in my 4th year of college, which I told you, like I did it for 5 years because of the double major and minor, I visited LA just for like 10 days or something. And I wanted to set up meetings just to meet with people. So obviously I wanted to meet with Disney people. And when you're a student, you're more brave when hitting people up. Like now, even though it's only been 4 years, I'm way more shy to write to people because I'm like, oh my God, when I reach out to them, I have to be perfect. But that is a lie. Like we'll never be perfect. Right now, for the people I want to reach out to, I'm waiting because I'm like, oh no, like I'm doing this cool project right now. I should write to them when I'm done with this. And I should wait because I want to be able to show them what amazing thing I'm doing right now. But then after that thing is done, I'm still busy. So I'm like, oh no, but if I hit them up now and if they miraculously have a gig for me, I can't take it. So this is a bad time to reach out. So like, I'm not reaching out to any of those people now. But when I was in still college, I had first, like I was less shy and I like sent them my music and everything, which maybe was a mistake, but it served me well. And I'm going to get to it in a second. And I don't know, I wasn't more passionate, but I guess I felt more free because I couldn't think of the bad repercussions of doing such a thing yet. And that gave me more of a bravery. But anyways, so I found 40 people from Disney. Some of them were like Berkeley alumni who were now doing business stuff, or some of them worked at Disney but no longer worked at Disney. And because I didn't have professional LinkedIn, so I found the names on LinkedIn, stalked them on Facebook, hit them up on Facebook Messenger, 40 people. Guess how many people wrote me? 2. Did anything come from them?
That's a good average. 2 is better than I was expecting.
Okay, that's good to know. And then those 2 invited me for lunch. They showed me around in the Burbank lot. It was amazing, but nothing came from it. Fast forward a year and a half. I have already completed my internship at RCP and I was assisting Jacob Shea at Bleeding Fingers, but I wasn't sure like if it's what I wanted to do because I missed Berkeley so much. Like after being in that amazing multicultural fun environment, LA is quite brutal. So anyways, and then I wake up to a message on my Facebook Messenger and it's like, hey, do you have any experience with a cappella? Hit me up. And I'm like, who's this weirdo? So I go up. It's like one of the Disney executives I once messaged a year and a half ago. So like within that same day, he got me meetings. The next morning at 7 a.m. at Burbank, I met Deke Sharon, who I'm assisting now for Disney's a cappella sensation, De Cappella. And through that, I've gotten so many things. So essentially, like all the good things that happened in my career are because of those stalky Facebook Messenger messages.
That's just an amazing answer. And I think that there's two things worth highlighting. What you just said, just the way you phrased it is something that I've said to people, and you're so preaching to the choir of, you know, what is truly the worst thing that's going to happen from writing this email, writing this message, writing this, you know, they'll likely either never see it or they'll forget about it. Or, you know, as long as you're not writing these emails that sound like you feel very entitled to their time and attention, but you're genuinely, you know, just wanting to meet them and you're excited and you feel like you have something to offer them, which clearly is, I would put money on that is the tone with which you wrote. But the second part that you didn't say, that you didn't highlight, that I think you did amazingly, was you had a pretty targeted goal. The idea of, I want to work with Disney. I'm going to message 40 people at Disney. Some people don't quite know what they want. And so it feels like an intimidatingly massive environment to be stepping into, where they're like, look at all these film studios, look at all these TV shows, look at all these video games, all these, like, I don't even know where to start. And there's something very laudable. It reminds me of once I did a panel with some composers once at a film festival, and Tyler Bates was on the panel, and he said something that I've never forgotten, where someone asked in the Q&A, how do you avoid getting pigeonholed as a composer? If you do, there's always these stories. You do one successful thing, and now everybody wants you to do other things like that one thing. And how do you avoid that? And Tyler goes, why would you avoid that? He goes, that's steady work. I fully embrace the idea of getting pigeonholed, because that means I have a steady string of opportunities of a thing that I already know I can do, I know I can deliver on. And then as I develop relationships with new people, because they're coming to me for a very specific product, my relationships with them will take me into new places. And case in point, doing horror and things like that, dark comedy with a guy like James Gunn eventually leads to him doing, Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a full-blown superhero MCU movie. And you wouldn't have necessarily hired him for a thing like that off of, Dawn of the Dead or the 300, but he embraced the idea that the people who come to the table with the next horror film or the next action film are gonna have, they're gonna want to go do different things at some point, and they'll hopefully take me with them. And I remember that was such a light bulb, because I'd always been like, oh no, yeah, you should definitely try to avoid being pigeonholed and and he had a very pragmatic reason why that's probably a crap thing. And what I love is that you're kind of coming at the same exact conclusion from a different perspective, but the idea of, I'm going to target Disney. I love Disney. I love the legacy of their music, blah, 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 blah. And so all my efforts are going to be at that.
For the back half of the end of 2021, I just stopped writing completely, just could not do it. And over that time of not doing it, there was just this internal pressure of, you should be writing, and it's not that hard, and it could be a minute a day, and just this internal conversation of, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. And it wasn't until I finally one day was like, I don't need to be doing this. I can choose to do whatever I want with my day. And this isn't something that I should feel tethered to have to do. Once I just removed that pressure, then things started popping up, and now I'm writing again, and now I'm working on things, and things are great. So just to that extent, and kind of expanding it just into, gender, whatever interest, wherever, path may lie, it's removing you understand you enjoy a thing. You understand it brings you joy. So if there's ever a time where maybe it stops bringing you joy, or it just becomes more tedious, A, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to step away. And then B, also just remove the pressure of, I should be doing this. Remove, because there's already enough going on in the world. There's already enough pressure you have to deal with. So why have yourself be another thing standing in your way of doing the thing you want to do or you don't want to do? Give yourself the space to kind of feel how you feel, and you love it, so it will come back, just when it needs to.
The next highlight I wanted to offer is when our conversation turned to the idea of challenges facing young and just starting out composers today. What kind of battles are they waging? What kind of challenges do they have that they think are intrinsic to the way the industry is now? If you joined the industry 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, the kinds of things that you'd be dealing with are different than those of today. And I just wanted to know, especially for those things that would fall in a kind of generational blind spot, what are you dealing with? It always seemed like YouTube practically has replaced the need for universities because of what's out there, but maybe that's too generous for YouTube still.
Yeah, I think YouTube is a great source now. 9 years ago, there was no Anne making video. There was no Austin Wintory YouTube channel where to learn that kind of stuff. So it was where can I learn? And on YouTube, I find that you can learn a lot of things nowadays, but it's how do you learn counterpoint, specifically good counterpoint on YouTube? And you need someone to correct your work and tells you, this is wrong, you can do this instead of that, because YouTube can help you, but it has its limitations, right? It's not like your teacher or your master. I don't have a master. read some post of you from the master you had in life.
Yeah,
your
I
teachers.
see what you mean.
But YouTube doesn't give you that. And that's a human level that teach you more than a YouTube video. And that makes you a different composer.
The whole world of unpaid internships is constantly brought up, and I think with good reason. I think especially if somebody is unpaid internships that are primarily academic, where you're there to be a fly on the wall and maybe do some very menial, like I did an internship at a music it was like a very small music library / music supervisor before, where my job was to put CDs in envelopes that were being mailed out to various, potential sync opportunities for their artist roster of this library. So like this was before that kind of stuff would have been done by email overwhelmingly, or Dropbox. They probably could have been doing it by email at that point, because it wasn't like, this was only maybe 2005 or so. But I don't think that was an unpaid intern, but I was also offering something of no particular value. I was mostly there to be a fly on the wall and to learn. So for me, I've never had an unpaid intern in that way, but I do think I don't hold a grudge against them for that. But what you just described is very different. Of you're being given tasks that are like assistant type tasks. I mean, those are not, to me, definitionally, there's a difference between intern, which is supposed to mean like you can't really meaningfully contribute much, versus an assistant, which means this whole thing could potentially collapse if you screw up. And that's got to be paid for.
I mean, I did both, to be honest. It wasn't just like super musical stuff. There would be times I would do notation, or I would actually like sit on the composer's rig and update it, or like install new stuff, or do, I don't know, troubleshooting of different sorts. But I would also vacuum clean and like go pay the rent of the studio, or take out the trash, or answer the phone calls. It would always differ. And because I was being mean, and I was like not complaining, but I was like, okay, I need to know in advance if I'm going to leave at 11. Like after that month, all I did was paying the TV bill, or getting art insurance for their private entity, or like I was actually punished because I guess I wasn't available 24/7. And that really hurt, because I don't know, I thought I was giving it my all. I don't know if I was or if I wasn't, but
well, it kind of sounds like it, but I'm curious. You said you did 9. This is one of the 9 you're talking about.
This is one of the 9.
How
there
similar,
were some really good ones.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to get a sense of, people love to tell, and this sounds very cynical, but people love to tell the kind of horror stories of their worst first jobs or their worst internships, especially in this business. There's a certain dark cloud that I think is a little unfair over the idea of kind of almost like predatory practices. But it's not that it's non-existent. It is a real thing. I just don't think it's like how everybody acts. They make it sound like every employer is horrible. But that's actually part of why I'm doing this. Is I'm here to kind of learn if I have a blind spot. How especially from talking to friends who were probably in a similar boat at that similar time, how broadly true do you think your experiences were there? Like if you were to just pick composers at random that offer assistant positions, do you think that your experience there is that you're describing, the kind of sort of shitty experience, is that more on the normal side, or do you think it was more of an outlier?
I don't know. Like I had some really good ones. I don't want to call this one bad either, because I did learn things there. Like I found out about some libraries there that I'm using today. And again, like it wasn't all bad. I'm just saying, as one thing to be improved, that even the younger people who don't have a name for themselves still have stuff going on that should be respected, because that's what was agreed on in the beginning. Yeah. I feel like expectations keep changing. Like once you're assisting someone, even if you agree on something, it suddenly becomes that you need to be available 24/7 and drop everything else that you're doing. That's the thing that bothers me. Like if the deal was that from the beginning, then I wouldn't have had other opportunities at the same time, and I would have honored it. And I think like both parties would have had a happier experience. So that's all I'm saying. But again, I learned so much. I'm so glad I did it. Like even knowing this, I would still go do it if I went back in time, because I met some people. I got to work on some cool projects. It's just one thing to be improved.
I think like for me, one of the things that really intimidated me, or still kind of intimidates me, but especially when I first started, is just like not knowing exactly what I want to do. Because I always heard from people like make goals for yourself and have a goal that you want to do in like 5 years, 10 years, which I kind of agree with. But like when I was just new to everything, I was like, I don't even know where to start or like what I want to do. There's no like magic project that I just really wanted to do at some point. So I think that was a challenge for me. I think like, for example, video games was not even on my radar. And this year I kind of stumbled into it and I like love it. So it's stuff like that where it's like now I've kind of got a little bit of a path to go down.
Does that mean film and TV, the sort of more traditional media scoring, was your focus more solely?
Yeah, originally it was, and I think a lot of my friends around me kind of had one specific thing that they wanted to do, like they wanted to do film or something, and I was still kind of not sure what I wanted to do, which I guess is a good problem to have, but I don't know. I always found that really intimidating because it's like, where do you start?
A subset of this question of what are the challenges that you face is, have you ever gotten bad advice that either you thought was bad and called it for what it is, or assumed was good, did it, and it backfired on you? And this led to all kinds of conversations that I've tried to cherry pick some interesting snippets from. But one of the things that I found interesting was that some of their answers kind of contradicted each other. And I'm intentionally featuring that because this is not a linear path. Everyone's mileage may vary. Our careers are going to unfold in wildly different ways from one another. And that's true for those that are long-time 50-year veterans and those whose first day was today. And I just want to always remind everybody that this is such an intrinsically subjective experience, this career, this life. And even for those in the first days of their career, the things that they would point out as problematic or particularly troubling actually might not all align. And it just seemed worth highlighting that because everything they said was valid and interesting.
I remember when I was starting on a video game that the first time that a company requested me to give all the rights, I didn't have any idea of how that worked. So I asked to a video game developer friend to ask how things work in video games. He told me, man, music is like chairs. Once you sold it, it's from the owner. So sign the contract. I'll say, oh, well, yeah, it makes sense. So I signed for, a couple of bucks, and I signed for giving up all the rights, and the soundtrack included songs. So then I learned that music is not like a chair. It's not like cheese. And I always remember the contract is sealed. I don't want to open and read it again because I don't want to remember what I signed by that time. And then with the years and experience and a lot of, missed opportunities, I learned how things worked because I received the same proposal again from other developers. And I said, hey, that's not how it works. And I say, yeah, it is. You take it or you leave it. Oh, okay, I leave it.
Well, and I think that's a very personal thing for everybody to decide for themselves, because I had an experience once that was very similar to yours, but it kind of the opposite. One of my very first movies, the director was my neighbor and very close friend. And he the producers were not the greatest, and they realized he and I are such good friends that I'm probably going to do it no matter what they offer me. And so they offered me a terrible deal, very little money and total ownership and everything for a small independent film. And because they made the calculation that I would go for it, you know, and they were right. I wanted the job more than I wanted the money, but not because of them or like the movie necessarily itself, although it was a great movie, but it was my friendship and my loyalty to the director. So I remember I showed the contract to a lawyer, and he goes, "This is one of the worst contracts I've ever seen, and I think you absolutely should not do this." And I ignored him, and I did it anyway. And that director is 15 years now, still one of my closest friends. We've done like 6 movies together. You know, every movie, the deal he's managed to get me has been better than the previous one. And like, it was, I made the long-term gamble, and it was, in hindsight, it was clearly the right choice. You know, I've made other gambles on people before where it didn't turn out as well. Either they never made another movie again, or, you know, we stopped working together because of, you know, they just found someone else they like better than me or whatever. Sometimes those long-term strategies don't pay off as well. But in this particular case with this guy, I ignored the bad advice would have been to turn it down. So I that's why I say it's personal. You have to follow your instincts. You have to trust your gut, and you never know what the answer is going to be. Like, your advice to hold your ground and be willing to say no is equally valid. So, and I just like to put out another example that sometimes it might be the opposite, where you go, you know what? I think this one might be worth the you know, rolling the dice.
There has been times where people told me, like, if you have a gut feeling about someone that they're going to take advantage of you, like, don't go into it. Or like, if somebody hurts you or disrespects you, like, feel free to walk away immediately. But I don't really like letting people down halfway. So like, I still deliver, or like, I sometimes don't fight. Like, even if I don't agree and I want to say it out loud, I'm just like, okay, like, depending on the situation, of course, if I really have to defend myself, I would go 100% and defend myself. But if it's something compromisable, I try not to turn things into drama, and that have always served me well in the long run, because like, even those disagreements that were really annoying at the time, or like whatever problem, drama, like I can't remember, but I had plenty.
Sure.
Like, I don't really let it affect our professional relationship in a bad way if I can avoid it. And there have been times like those people that I was having problems with have become like really amazing collaborators. And I'm so glad I didn't burn the bridges, or I didn't be like, oh, like, if you're not okay with this, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not in that mindset, because as you said, like, doing this is my dream and I have always wanted to do this. So even I'm up at 4 a.m. doing revisions, I'm still feeling very grateful and humbled and honored to be working on whatever I'm working on. So I guess like that's the only bad advice I can think of. I think what's challenging is, again, only because I'm in the earlier stages and I'm handling everything by myself, not having help. Like, I'm my own composer and, I don't know, arranger, orchestrator, music preparation person. I'm my own agent, my own accountant, my own social media coordinator. So like, I'm doing everything musical and non-musical by myself. At the same time, from time to time, I'm also assisting other composers or doing additional music or music prep for them. So like, it gets really tricky from a time management standpoint, because like every single project almost has a difference in the whole timeline that we first agree on. So sure. Because I learned this, I'm like literally double booking myself, because if I don't, I would have days without gigs. And like, when I do that and when everything comes together, like, it's really cathartic, but it's also great because I'm doing what I love and like doing all these cool things at the same time. But I think, yeah, like the biggest challenge is doing everything as one person. And honestly, I don't know how to trust another person and bring another person into my workflow, because I haven't done that before. But yeah, like that's what I've been thinking lately.
I've kind of already brought it up, but it's that whole jack of all trades, have to be good at everything kind of mentality. That is something that I've only recently learned is actually not good advice at all. And the fact that we're trying to force everyone into that thing as opposed to letting people find the things they're interested in and support them down that path is just generally more helpful.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's funny that you're in a sort of do as I say, don't do as I do, since you
because I like to
try to be a jack of all trades.
It works for me. Yeah, it works for me, but I understand it's not for everyone. At least as far as the people that I was around and I was in school with, it was kind of the way that we were taught, where we were given a lot of skills in a lot of different areas and kind of bred to be these kind of jack of all tradesy, kind of know a little bit of everything kind of approach, in that, that opens up the most amount of opportunity. And for someone like me, who is just already like that by nature, I have no issue with that. But there are definitely, what you have to learn and what I had to understand is, it's okay to have a niche. It's okay to have a thing you want to do and focus explicitly on that. And if you know that's in your passion, that's what you want to go to. It's okay to not necessarily neglect the other things you need to know, but it's okay to have a priority. And then in addition to that, and it's something that I've been harping on, is the collaboration part of that, where if you have a niche and you have this thing that you're really good at and you have this thing that you love to do, but you hate mixing, let's say, chances are you have someone in your circle who's really into mixing the same way that you're into whatever you're doing. And if you just reach out to them and work together on a thing, it'll be better for it. And then now you have a new friend. So it's this thing
and
of
are you
not
saying
being...
that...
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no, sorry. Finish your thought. I don't mean to cut you off.
I don't know. It's just that combination of finding the thing you love, doing that, focusing in on what interests you, and then reaching out to other people to fill in those gaps, as opposed to feeling like you, the one person, has to be extraordinary in all these different areas in order to even have a shot at maybe someone noticing you.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is when I first started, people always told me to make specific goals of what I wanted to do. And I kind of went against that, which might be a bad thing. But I tend to like to just take things as they come. And if an opportunity just pops up, and then I'll do it, and that will lead to something else. And, so I think that has worked to my advantage in a way, because I don't think I'd be where I am as of right now if I hadn't just kind of taken opportunities as they come.
When you're specifically studying the world of, okay, I want to be a media composer, film, TV, games, blah, 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 advertising, whatever. There's this, in the early days especially, you'll only have yourself to depend on. So you need to know everything. You need to know how to write. You need to know how to orchestrate. You need to know how to do mock-ups. You need to know how to mix. You need to know how to implement game audio. You need to know how to sound design. You need to know how to light a YouTube video. You need to know how to edit. You need to know copying and engraving. You need to know conducting. You need to know how to play every instrument. You need to speak every language. It's like there's just no limit to the things that a young composer ought to know if they really want to stand a chance. And the thing that came up in our conversation that was so insightful to me was realizing the juxtaposition. He really drove home for me how much that is, kind of the lesson of school. And it was even when I was in school too, but now even more, you must only, the more you can do everything, the more opportunities you have. And it's a logical conclusion to reach, right? Like if I know how to do all these things, then anytime somebody needs one of the following 30 tasks done, I eligibly could fill that job. Okay, great. Sounds good on its surface. But what was interesting was, as he was saying that, I was realizing this video that I just recently put out with all these composer colleagues of mine, where I asked them who are the unsung heroes, they all practically said, oh, the people that helped me, that are my team, that I wouldn't be able to do this without. I.e., I can't do everything. So it was like, where's the meeting point of those two things? All these established composers that explicitly say, I have help and I couldn't do it without it. And all the young composers that are told, you must learn to do everything without help. Somewhere in the middle, those two things connect. Because people start, it seems to be an inevitable pathway. I've only had an assistant for a few years. And generally have always done everything myself. And I've certainly never hired, I've never had a composer staff member. You know, I've asked for help when time was short in a kind of arranging capacity a couple of times, but generally speaking,
Right.
I've almost never done that. But it is an inevitability that people start to find ways to be more efficient with their use of time, which invariably means hiring people. And there's a wonderful kind of circle of life to that, because you're creating an opportunity for somebody to cut their teeth. And then eventually the idea is you're also training and you're helping them, because they'll fly the nest and make their own way in life. And you're hoping that you're arming them for the success to do that. Thank you so much for watching. As I mentioned earlier, these were long conversations. I spoke for over an hour with each of these 4, and at some point I may put the full unedited ones, because so much good stuff came up that I just can't put all in one video, especially one short enough to actually be palatable to watch. So let me know in the comments if you are interested in seeing the full-length ones, and I might put that on the schedule if it seems like there's interest. Either way, thank you so much for checking it out. Thank you so much to my 4 wonderful guests whose careers I just am giddy with excitement to see continue to unfold. One last thing I wanted to leave you with before I say goodbye that came up during one of the conversations that I think is just always worth repeating. There's no need to look down on people just starting, and there's no reason to deify people who are not just starting. You know, like everyone are fundamentally the same, you know, on more levels than not.